welcome you to Using Hidden Yardage as a Predictor of Success and Productivity for Special Teams in American Football. Jared Hottle is an offensive coordinator at Dakota State University. He graduated with an economics degree from Central College and a master's degree in educational technology from Dakota State. He has done analytical research to enhance his on-field practice and recruiting processes. So let's welcome Jared.
Thanks, it's a nice introduction. And it's awesome to be here. I want to thank all the GLASC people that have put this on, and all the volunteers, and all the great speakers that are here, and they're so smart. Ethan, can't wait for his, and Eric did a really good job, and Ron this morning, so just happy to be a part of it. So I'm going to take probably a little bit different approach than maybe you've heard in being a coach. There's sometimes there can be a disconnect between the analytics world and maybe in practice the coaching world, and so I'm just going to talk about a little bit of my thoughts on that, and maybe it's not as technical of a talk, but hopefully you can pull something from it. The first thing I want to talk about is how important I think analytics is to coaches. You look at the last 50, 60 years, the Junction Boys and all this, and you see where we've come with strength and conditioning, and where we've come with nutrition, and where we've come with all these different things to get an edge, because coaches are always looking for that edge on game day to really develop their players and have a chance to win on Saturday. But for some reason, the analytics world seems to be lagging a little bit behind, and I think a lot of it has to do with a lot of coaches maybe don't understand a lot of the analytics out there, and I think that's wrong. I think coaches, if you're truly into developing your players and getting the best output that you can get, I think you gotta look to every possible way you can get that edge. So here's some of the things that I look to do as a coach. And I think the first thing, and Tom was talking about it this morning, and it's just the communication and blending traditional styles and traditional strategy with film watching, with traditional practice methods, all that, blending that with analytics is so important. That it's a tool. It's not, no one's trying to replace anybody, and we're trying to communicate with each other and then work together to create something better than each individual person. And I think it's also important that you need to look the opposite way and look at someone else's perspective and see how possibly maybe what you're saying is combative to what they're thinking, and kind of be able to soften that or communicate it. And I think that's big. But as a coach, I'm looking for trends and data over time. I think that's a big thing for me. I think coaches can get kind of in a groove of this is what we do, this is our philosophy, but is that philosophy working, and hasn't been working for the last year, the last 5 years. I think it's big. It can really help me as a coach in talking to our players about what things we should emphasize. Bill Conley wrote a great piece on the 5 factors in college football that lead to success, and I think that's big for me, and that's what I talk to a lot of our players about. Limiting turnovers, being successful, trying to get explosive plays. Obviously, special teams is an important part of it, so all that's really, really important. I think you need to be able to evaluate without biases, try to get your biases out of that. I think numbers can really help that with coaches, because a lot of times they get stuck on, this is the way we've always done things. And then, of course, with a lot of the probability models and the expected points models, you can take calculated risks when those periods come and hopefully have some good outcomes from that. But it's not just some of my thoughts on coaches and analytics, but I'll get right into the hidden yardage stuff. So the hidden yardage kind of was created out of this idea that special teams are just inherently very difficult to track. It can be super volatile and it's super volatile at the bigger levels of college, but it's even more volatile at our level when you get, playing up in Aberdeen, South Dakota, and you get 80-mile-an-hour winds. That's going to change some of your special teams game planning than when you're playing in a dome or when you're playing somewhere else. Turf versus grass is going to play a role for your kickers, depending on how well the field is upkept. So I think it's inherently difficult to track, inherently volatile, just like all things in football are very difficult to try to put a number on. And I put that special teams as a forgotten of the 3 phases, and the one thing I think with that is no kid ever grew up wanting to be a gunner on punt team, right? He wants to be a quarterback, he wants to be defensive back, edge rusher. So you like to say there's 3 phases in football, but really there's 2, and then there's the stepchild of special teams. So That's all right. But so it's just not a lot of data and not a lot of research done on it. But it is important. This is a graph taken from Football Analytics. It's a little old, but I think the results ring true today. The further you are away from your goal, the less chance you have of scoring, and that's pretty intuitive. Bill Conley talked about, and the team that wins the field position battle is going to win 72% of the time. So that's pretty simple to know how important special teams are. If you can start closer to your goal, you're probably going to be a little bit more successful. So with hidden yardage, I attempted to kind of capture the power of special teams in its volatile state that it is. And of course, you got multiple special teams. There's not just, one throw or one run. It's, kickoff is going to be measured a little bit differently than a kick return versus a punt or a punt return. So you're trying to get all these things into one standardized measurement. And then you're also trying to be able to relate this from team to team, so hopefully you can get it standardized and distilled down to that. So here's kind of what we came up with at Central College when I was there. They were doing it before I got there. I thought it was a good idea, and so I just kind of expanded on some of it. But the baselines are set for kickoff and kick return at the 30-yard line of the return team. And the reason that is because every kickoff is going to happen from the 35-yard line, for the most part, unless there's a penalty or something like that. So 0 hidden yardage would be a kickoff team tackling the return team at the 30-yard line. And then vice versa for kick return. And then punt and punt return, your baseline is going to start at a net of 35. So that's going to factor in touchbacks, that's going to factor in blocks, that's going to factor in any type of return the team sets up, and of course the punt. So just kind of going through this, I was talking to Ron, I got to find a way to scrub some of this because I just have to go through and get it all myself. But DAC stats, just going through a lot of their play-by-plays, just kind of some examples. So kick return, that first one up there, if I'm tracking for the kick return team, I see the kickoff went from the 34 to the Dakota State 24. It got returned to the 36, so that's 6 yards past the 30-yard line, so that'd be a positive 6. You look kickoff team, so I'm tracking for the kickoff. The kickoff went to the 5, returned to the 27, so that's 3 yards inside the 30, so that'd be positive 3 for the return team. And then punt, you see, not a very good punt right there, but he punted it from the 44 and went out of bounds up to 37, so we ended up with negative 16 yards of hidden yardage there based on the 35-yard net. And then a punt punt from the 34 to the 40, and so you see a positive 9 on the return team. So I kind of just did some simple regression analysis on this to see, does this actually lead to winning? Is this something that's actually maybe important? And so I knew at Central College, that's where I went to school, they were doing some data on this, so I got all the data they had. I used all the data we had over 4 years. Ended up with 107 usable games of hidden yardage to go through using simple regression analysis with a win-loss indicator as my dependent variable. And you see, maybe not the greatest of models, but there might be something to it. You'll see the intercept is pretty high. Not a single season, or one season of that, those teams right there, the Central College teams and Dakota State was under 500, so that's my guess and why that intercept is so high. But you see there is a positive relationship, and it is significant, but it's kind of pushing that level alpha that you get a little worried. But adjusted R-square is really low, so that's kind of interesting. What does that mean? And I think it just shows the volatility of football and how many factors play a role in football of winning and losing. And you see kind of a shotgun blast, but you see it at least kind of working in a positive direction. So it made me kind of want to explore this a little bit more. So I kind of scaled this model to our whole conference, playing the North Star Conference. And I just used conference games this year. We got 40 usable conference games between all the teams from last year, again using that win-loss indicator, and you see the model got a little bit stronger. You see that intercept went lower. That makes a lot of sense because there's teams that are not very good and teams that are good, and you see that kind of reversion there. And you look at hidden yardage, it's a little bit more, has a higher positive correlation with winning. See the p-value is a lot more significant. You see the adjusted R-squared went up, so that's some good things for this model. And you see that there is some predictability when it comes to hidden yardage and winning games, which is stuff we've seen other people work on. So using this model, I got to apply it to the next year. I'm very excited to apply it to next year to see if this does have any predictive power, but it did predict that teams that had 100 hidden yards won 100% of the time. Teams that had negative 50 hidden yards predicted losses that were correct 80% of the time. So here's kind of how I go through, and as a coach, you kind of look at some of these things when you're looking at special teams and how does this help us as a football team. And I was kind of going back and forth, but we can get an actual conference winning percentage, and then what the model would have predicted they would have won, and then this percent productive is literally just taking the best team in hidden yards, the team that achieved the most hidden yards, and comparing everyone else relative to them. And I think that's a big thing. When you're trying to win conference games, you're trying to be the best in the conference, you should be comparing yourself to the team that is best in the conference and see what you need to do to try to improve in that area. So kind of working back and forth. I think it's big for monitoring special teams as it relates to others in the conference. A funny thing I think about this is Dickinson State, they won the conference, won every game in the conference. Not very good on special teams. They're historically known, I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but historically known for just being an offense and defense team. We're going to put our 2s and our 3s on special teams. We want to end up with the ball at the end, and we trust our offense and defense is just going to be better than every other team's offense and defense, as long as we don't screw up special teams. So me as a coach, when I'm looking at Dickinson State and we're going to play them, well, there's a huge edge you can gain by winning that special teams against them, because they're not going to really try that hard. They're going to have not as good of players on special teams, and we have to be able to find some way to exploit that. You look at a team like Jamestown, and if I'm the head coach or one of the coaches at Jamestown, I see they have really good special teams, but they ended up not being very good in the conference. So they might be able to look elsewhere, whether offensively or defensively. Maybe we need to make an improvement in one of those areas because our special teams is actually doing pretty good. So it allows you to kind of have a temperature of your own team. And then, of course, the last thing, me as a special teams coordinator, you get to see how productive your team is based on the best team in the conference. You can break this out, which I did do, just don't have it on here. You can break it out in punt return, kickoff, kick return, and specifically nail down what area maybe we need to improve on, what area are we doing good on, why is that happening to us, do we not have the best players on there, do we need a better kicker, do we need a better punter, do we need to just change something up. So it allows you to kind of be able to make adjustments as we go on. So I put this on there. You guys will probably laugh at this. It's kind of funny. But I had a coach, I'm talking to him about hidden yardage, and he said, well, Dakota State, they have a lot of hidden yards. That's only because you guys are tracking hidden yards. So basically assuming that because we're tracking it, our players are going down the field and that's all they're thinking about is making a stop, and they're not actually, similar to how I think of when teams say, oh, we can't turn the ball over. We'll win a game if we can't turn the ball over. We can't just take a knee every time because you don't want to turn the ball over, right? So I wanted to try to test some of this, and I called it the fitness band effect. And I called it that because pedometers, Fitbits, I hate to break it to you if you don't know, but they're not all that accurate. So then some people might think they're accurate. Some are better than others, but the important thing is you're tracking something. And that's where a lot of the effect comes from. If you're trying to get healthier, lose weight or whatever, it comes from day in and day out tracking yourself, seeing how you're improving, seeing, I only have 2,000 steps, I need to go do something. So it's kind of that motivation factor with that. So do you see, my question was, do you see because you're tracking something more buy-in? And as a coach who's doing his own analysis and his own scrubbing his own data, do I have biases in there when I'm getting that data, like, oh, we're doing hidden yards, I want to make sure our hidden yards is high, so I'm going to ignore something here or there. So to kind of test that, I use a chow test, which kind of takes two independent variables, and using the sum of square residuals, you can kind of test to see if one sample is similar to the other sample. And so I did that. I broke it off, all the teams that I knew were using hidden yardage, which was us in Central College, and all the teams that I knew weren't, which is the other teams in the conference, to see if there was a difference between a team that actually is tracking this versus a team that is not. Found out that there is no difference, so that's a good thing for me. Probably you guys would have guessed that, and maybe not an important step, but just something to kind of check yourself and kind of keep your biases out of that. So So, in conclusion, I guess, obviously redoing this for, getting more data is going to be huge, and redoing it to see kind of, if you can replicate these things, especially at a bigger level, FBS level or NFL level. NFL is a little bit different because there's so many strict special teams rules with illegal man downfield, and so would you even see just a really close reversion to the mean on a lot of those teams because they're not really doing much different. And punters are so good in the NFL, whereas at college and some of the other levels, you're seeing a mass array of talents. One thing I'd really like to do, I'd love to hear if you guys had any feedback or ideas on this, but optimizing what the baseline for hidden yardage should be. It seems to me, I kind of picked up on it from another coach who heard it from another coach, but it seems now the reason it was chosen, the 30-yard line and kickoffs and the net 35, is somewhat arbitrary. So trying to optimize that baseline, whether you use average starting field position after a kickoff or you use the average net yards of a punt in college. So kind of looking to adjust that to try to keep the model fluid and also relevant. But I do believe hidden yardage is a viable option for calculating special team success and the success of the team, and there is some evidence to back that up, so we'll keep using it. So here's me, I'm the offensive coordinator now. I just started a blog, so if you guys want to check it out, it's pretty cool. Thank you. Any questions?
I think you're the only coach that knows what a residual is, so you got that working for you. But I'm glad you brought up that Dickinson was it example, because the first thing I thought when you showed the results is, well, it stands to reason to me that better teams, higher performing teams are going to have better coaches, particularly at the coordinator level, and that would filter down to special teams. They're more detail oriented, and so it's not necessarily, it's the other, that the better teams have better special teams, not the, what I mean? So,
yeah.
I think it's smart that you brought up the Dickinson example, like, well, here's a good team that doesn't score well in this measure.
Right,
so.
right. Thanks.
So I was wondering, the total amount of value that you found when you were doing the conference level data, I think 0.17 is actually fairly high.
Yeah.
Does that potentially change recruiting strategies? Because if punting is half of it, or I guess a quarter of it, then an individual punter is probably much more valuable than most recruiters would think of it.
That's a great point, and especially at our level where there's no worry of we can't give full ride scholarships, but we can give more money than to a kicker, because of that, and a lot of Division I schools, they get all the kicker army to come and they let them compete for a spot, and maybe that's not the way to go, but Ethan, you can't find a kicker though, so I don't know.
That's NFL though.
Okay. Yeah, Eric.
Have you thought of adjusting just for some yards per play allowed and yards per play gained offensively and defensively, just because, or something like that, so that you could say, just have them be covariates and say, because then I think the Dickinson State would flash even higher, right? Because their win percentage is probably entirely indicated by those two.
Yep.
And then a team that's weaker but has better special teams, you could, again, it just control for those two variables and see sort of how much it does matter even in relation to those.
Yeah, I think that would be a great point.
And it's probably not hard to get that data.
Right.
I'm not trying to pour more data in. That's a hard problem, but
yeah. Good. Yeah.
Have you considered putting weights on scoring, touchbacks, turnovers?
That's another good point, because I look at I've done a lot of research on blocked punts. If you block a punt, your chances of winning go higher. It's even more so than just the yardage gain from a blocked punt, but just the morality of, can we even get a punt off now? So that's a good point. And the touchback, we do factor that into the hidden yardage. We'll take away the touchback. It will count it as a return basically, but that's another big factor too, because if you're punt from the 50 and you have a touchback, it's really not that good of a play. So yeah.
You just kind of got to a really other interesting point that we haven't talked about is the long snapper.
Yeah.
You don't think about the long snapper until they screw up.
Yeah.
They become a big deal.
Yep.
But I also think you asked a really cool question in that, on the one hand, punting and special teams, kickoffs, it's an individual activity, given that if somebody's got a rocket leg, that helps. But it also depends on the quality of coverage you have.
Yep.
I'm just thinking, this is one example. if you remember Chris Cluey, towards the end of his career, he was getting heat from the Minnesota Vikings, and he said, they're saying, look, your average went down, but he said the coaches were telling me that our coverage team sucks, and they were telling me to fan time. And
Yeah, I remember that story actually.
yeah. So on the other hand, you might have a really selfish punter that wants a big average, and they're out kicking their coverage, which is also really dangerous.
Yeah.
So I guess the next frontier for you, and I think it's really cool that you're a coach that's willing to do this sort of thing, is to try to both like measure the individual contributions to special teams, either it's the kicker or the gunner, and also the team, how well they work together. So
yeah, that's a great point. We actually, it's kind of funny you brought that up because we had a punter that he thought he was this great pocket punter, and he thought he could turn the ball over so great. Well, I'm a big proponent of the rugby kick, which a lot of you guys have seen in college, and I just think limited returns, you get the front roll going, you end up with a lot of hidden yards because of it. And so once we kind of bought him into that, it improved. But he was hitting ugly punts, and he wasn't a fan of it because of that. But I had to talk him into it because I could say, if no one's there, just run for a first down. So he was all into that. So, but yeah, I think that's a good point.
recruit Australia to go to.
Oh, I want to. I want to go down there. That'd be a lot of fun.
That's
Gotta
not
get
the
the
recruiting
catapult
budget. No way. No way.
So, well, thanks everybody. I appreciate
All
it.
right, and thank you, Jared.